Over the past couple of years, people have been discovering the movie Hotel Transylvania. It's become kind of a Halloween classic. So this year, Hotel Transylvania 2 came out. I saw that today, and I'm going to review that for you now. It's what you expect. Do you like the first movie? Then you're going to like this one. Most likely. I could see maybe a few scenarios where some people wouldn't. Maybe they're just tired of the same old thing or whatever. But yeah, you can kind of tell from the trailers, like the setup is very clear. You know, the grandfather, Dracula, wants his little grandson to be a vampire, and his vampire fangs haven't come in. So they take him away, and they try to teach him how to be scary in order for his fangs to grow in. And it goes about as well as you'd expect. It's the basic premise. What I like about this movie, this sequel, about what it does, I would say it's about on par with the first one. I mean, maybe one is a little bit better than the other, but they're very close. They both kind of have the same kind of good things and the same kind of bad things. You know, all the nice, like, sweet family moments are there, and a lot of that comes from the characters, because Dracula, at the end of the day, he cares. He loves his daughter, and he loves his grandson, and he just wants the best for them, and he's misguided. So it comes from there. It comes from, like, a good place. So yeah, and what it doesn't do that some sequels do is it doesn't really go, okay, now we're doing a sequel, now everything has to be gigantic and bigger and flashier, and it doesn't really do that. The location expands a little bit. So the first movie took place mainly in the hotel, and this one takes place mainly in the woods, really. It bounces between the hotel and the woods, and there's some shots of the couple in the movie kind of seeing the sights in California, but you know, it doesn't feel like, oh, like, you know, now we're on the huge big carnival planet or anything like that. Now it's not like that. It's not like Hotel Transylvania became Planet Transylvania or anything like that. So I like that they did that. All the kind of sizing up in scope, it sizes it up a little bit, but it's all in the service of the plot and the story. Yeah, so the movie, that's another thing with kind of the humor in the film is there are some, you know, with a lot of modern animated films, you see a lot of pop culture references and stuff like that. But here it's worked in really nicely. Occasionally there may be like some dancing or something like that that's a little out of place, but it doesn't last too long. There's a moment where the grandpa and his little grandson are breakdancing, but it's probably not even 3 seconds long, so you know, it gets a wide berth. But generally it goes along with the theme of the movie, which is just that these monsters are kind of old. They're kind of from a different era, and things are changing, and now monsters and human beings are mixing and interacting, and, you know, they're just kind of, now that the barriers are down and there's tolerance, just kind of reacting to each other and kind of getting accustomed to each other. So a lot of the pop culture references are Dracula just being old and not getting it. There's a nice bit where they're trying to show him a cell phone, and he's trying to tap on it, but, you know, his fingernails are too long. He's like, "What's going on? I'm tapping. I'm not getting it anywhere." And he's like really reserved and kind of stuck in his old ways. And the other monsters in his posse, the Wolfman and the Frankenstein monster and the Invisible Man, they're and the Mummy, they're all kind of more hip. They're a little more with it. They're still old. They're still kind of like old grandpa men, but they're changing to the times a little bit better. Whereas, and they're more okay with just being kind of pop culture icons more than Hollywood scary monsters. There's a scene where Frankenstein's monster scares a couple of joggers, and they say, "Oh, okay, can we take a picture with you?" And he's like, "Yeah, okay, good to meet you," that kind of thing. And then, you know, Dracula just isn't having any of it. So a lot of the humor comes from that, which I like. You know, it's not like just blatant name dropping or things that make sense out of place. You know, when not the best example, but when the Shrek movies did it, it was a spoof of modern times, but sometimes there would be references, you know, in the Middle Ages that wouldn't really make sense. All of these pop culture references make sense because it's these monsters reacting with modern times and trying to adapt to it. So that I liked. And I really liked the theme of the movie. You know, there's a lot of movies about tolerance, but this was a movie that kind of addressed, basically new forms of relationship. I think mostly specific, like it's broad enough you can interpret it anyway, but mostly kind of mixed race relationships, mixed race families, things like that. And you know, it's still an issue. It still is an issue. There are people who still have problems with it. So it's nice to see it addressed in a kids film, and they do blatantly say, "Oh, we do have a few mixed monster human couples. We'll introduce you to a few of them. You can make friends, that kind of thing." So you see people kind of adapting to it and adjusting to it, and there's Johnny's mother in the movie. She keeps referring to herself as normal, and Mavis, Dracula's daughter, calls her out at one moment, and she's like, "Can we just stop using that word, normal? Because, you know, for me, my background is normal. For you, your background is normal." That's what's implied by that. It's a very small line. It's happening in like a background conversation, so it's not shoved in your face. There's kind of an argument going on in the background, and that line comes out. So it's, you know, it's nice. It's there, but it's not too in your face. Like you know it. You get who these characters are. You know, Johnny's family is kind of just like the archetypal white family. You know, the mother is very, like, trying to be nice and trying to be understanding, but just doesn't get the culture, doesn't get the other culture. So, like, even though she's trying to be understanding, and I think they say as much at one point, even though she's trying to be helpful, it just comes across as offensive. Like, there's a scene where she decorates, Johnny and Mavis come to stay with them, and she decorates Mavis's half of the room with Halloween decorations, like obvious Halloween decorations, like just cheap you'd find at any dollar store, and you can tell Mavis is just a little weirded out, like, oh, that's nice. It's like I don't know, like going to the dollar store and getting like a Hawaiian lei and the seashells and stuff like that for a couple from Hawaii, something like that. So yeah, like it was nice. Like it's nice to see. I'm not saying that obviously there's a lot of cartoons are about tolerance, but this one was very specific. It was about, you know, families mixing and stuff like that, and it was very much about family dynamics. It was very much about families kind of coming together and accepting the other culture's differences and all that kind of stuff. It was specifically targeted at that, and it was nice to see that because that is still an issue. It was nice to see it be as specific as that, and again, it may be another film about tolerance, but you know, hey, it's a message that still needs to be heard, and more importantly, it was done right. In my opinion, it was done right. It doesn't hash over the kind of same old stuff as last time. You know, Dracula, he's grown from last time. He's okay with the humans, but he's really obsessed with his own culture, which is another kind of nice theme of the movie. Just kind of groups that are obsessed with their own culture to the point where they exclude everybody else, and they don't want anything to do with, or even if they're okay with other people, it's just if it's not of their own culture, it's not good enough. It's addressing people like that, and there are people like that. There very much so are. So it was nice to see, and you know, Dracula's the hero of the movie, but that's a huge flaw. Like we've seen kind of the father of the bride type, the dad who's not okay with the situation kind of thing. But that's the nice thing about this movie. It's not that the dad is just like. It's not that he's unwilling to kind of give a little leeway or anything like that, but you know, his own culture is important to him, and he forgets that at the end of the day, you know, it doesn't really matter. You know, it doesn't really matter what race you are. It's just, you know, you love your family because they're your family, you know, and that's, you know, you love people because they're people. You love your friends because they're your friends. You know, that's the important part, and you know, it's not a bad thing to like your own culture, but just Drac does it to the extent where, you know, other cultures don't matter, and that's a problem. That's a really big problem. So I like that it was addressing that, and you know, it's not, Dracula's not a mean character. He wasn't in the last movie either, and I think that's what saves it. You know, Adam Sandler has a history and kind of a legacy of playing these really unlikable characters in his movies. That's kind of what he's become known for now, playing this unlikable jerk. But in this movie, in these movies, he's really not. I think that's why the movies work so well. He's really not a jerk. He's a good guy. He's well intentioned, but sometimes he's justifiably scared of what's going on. And you know, at the core of the problem, it's just that he doesn't want his family to leave. He wants his family to be close. He wants his grandson to grow up near him. He wants to play with his grandson. And, you know, it might be a little overprotective, but it's not at all mean-spirited, which is what I like about that. Which is what I like about this movie, and which is what I like about the character. If they had played him as, like, this completely, like, overbearing, no, my house, my rules kind of vampire, it never, kind of dad, it wouldn't have worked at all. But, I mean, it wasn't that case from the onset in the first movie, and it's not the case here. Okay, so that's basically the gist of the kind of the story elements of the film. Now I'm going to talk about a few of the more technical elements of the film. One of them being the jokes and the pacing. The jokes they're pretty good in this. I laughed quite a few times. You know, some of them didn't land or whatever, but you know, generally they're pretty funny, and like there are a few jokes that are just kind of unexpected, that you weren't looking for it, or the setup wasn't obvious, so you didn't see it coming. So it was nice when you saw it. A lot of visual gags, which is really nice. Sony Pictures Animation seems to be really good at doing that. They seem to be really good at doing visual gags. But pacing, structure-wise, it kind of has the same problem that I had in the first movie. When the set pieces work, they're really, really nice and really fun. But when they don't work, they kind of slow the story down. Like there was a scene in the first Hotel Transylvania where they're having like a pool party, and I think Blobby or some kind of slime monster falls in the pool and turns it all into gelatin, and he's jumping, and for some reason, like for whatever reason, that sequence just didn't work for me, and it just kind of slowed down the plot. And like we already had a fun sequence beforehand where he and Dracula are flying on tables, like kind of chasing after each other, and it was a lot of fun, so that was kind of a slowdown. The scenes with the monsters trying to scare people in the woods generally work really well. When Mavis and Johnny are just kind of touring around San Francisco, California, sorry. When they're touring around California and they're just kind of seeing the sights, and they go to a bike park and they go to the mini mart, you saw it in the trailers, the movie just kind of slows down and just kind of grinds to a halt. It's a lot more fun to see the monsters trying to be scary and failing because they're so old. I mean, that's funny. That's where the comedy is. Mavis just adjusting to California isn't really that funny. Because she's not a goofball. Like, she doesn't go in for the pratfalls and bad things don't happen to her. When she goes riding in the bike park, it's not like this weird misunderstanding. She does it perfectly, and that's, it's boring. You don't want to see the character be perfect. You want to see the suffering and the pain and the failure. That's where the meat is in comedy. Yeah, so those scenes fell a bit flat and they slowed the plot down. And I thought the movie was gonna end a lot sooner than it did. The movie gets to a point where you think, okay, this is gonna be, the last 20 minutes, we're gonna wrap up now, kind of thing. But it's, basically, Dracula tries to teach Johnny, the little grandson, Dennis, I think his name is, tries to teach Dennis how to fly and drops him off this big cliff thing, and eventually flies after and catches him, and Mavis finds out about it. And then when they get back to the hotel, she says, I'm taking my son, and then says, we're going to stay for the party, for the birthday party, because everything's leading up to the grandson's birthday party. She says, we're going to stay for the birthday party, but then we're leaving. And it's like, that's kind of a dead fish plot-wise. It's like, it just kind of lands flat. It's not like an ultimatum. Like, you see her when Dracula gets back, and she's really mad, put her son's life in danger, and says, "Give me my son back." And you think stuff is going to get real, and then she says, "Okay, I'm leaving tomorrow." You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have the same effect as, "Okay, we're getting our coats, we're going now, because I don't think he's safe with you," which she says at one point. I don't feel like my son is safe with you. So, but instead, we're gonna leave tomorrow. Instead of like, it should have been more immediate. It should have, like, she should have left right then, and they have to go back and get her. Like, for pacing wise, it would have been better. And it's only at this point in the movie. Well, not even. It's at this point in the movie, Uncle Vlad, who is in all the trailers, Mel Brooks as the old great-grandpa Dracula, who's supposed to be this big, intimidating, old-school vampire. He lives in a cave surrounded by all these giant man-bats with red glowing eyes, right? He's the intimidating monster of the family who just, if they said that his granddaughter married a human, he would just flip out. They say, literally, he'll eat their souls if he finds out. They say that in the movie. So, it's he hasn't even been introduced at this point. And, like, we get to that point, like, you build it up, and, like, they built up, Mel Brooks being in this part. Obviously, it's his voice, and Uncle Vlad's got this great look, this chin and this hooked nose, and looks like this old, decrepit vampire. But he's barely in the movie. And, you could probably cut him out, and you would have the same kind of plot beats. It just adds another little bit for it to go on a little more. It adds more shenanigans. It's like, oh, Grandpa Vlad is coming to the birthday party. If he sees the humans here, he'll kill them. Well, we'll dress them all up like monsters. And he can't find out because shenanigans, right? But, yeah, it doesn't really, all these things are happening too late in the plot. Just in my opinion. It should have happened a little sooner, Grandpa Vlad, he should have been, he kept saying, like, "No, we're not going to Vlad, we're not going to Vlad." I thought the movie was going to build up to a point where, okay, we tried to teach the kid how to scare, nothing's worked. I think we have to bring in the big guns. I think we have to bring in Grandpa Vlad. So he should have come in earlier. He should have come in earlier to the story, and then Mavis should have got mad at everybody, justifiably so, because they did put her son's life in danger, and then stormed off with the kid, and then they should have had to, try to make amends somehow. Not necessarily, like, actually physically left, but I mean, at least the threat of "we're going right now" should have been made. The movie starts off with the wedding. You actually see Mavis and Johnny get married. I guess it's just kind of implied at the end of the last movie, but you see the wedding, and then you see her tell Dracula that she's pregnant, and they go through some stuff with her being pregnant, and then little Dennis is born, and then little Dennis, grows up, and then there's the whole issues with the fangs. This takes maybe, like, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes of just kind of exposition, leading to a plot point we already know. And this is kind of important because, these movies aren't being created they're not being released in a vacuum. We see the trailers, we know what's coming, and we know the basic plot structure. It should have, started with, okay, Dracula's maybe running around the hotel. Okay, getting everything ready for little Dennis's 5th birthday, which is coming up soon. And it's like, okay, are those streamers in place? Yes, they are. Are the bats ready in the corner? Yes, they are. It should have started off, like, right there. We don't need to see them get married. We don't need to see a pregnancy announcement. We don't need to see them go through the pregnancy at all. We don't need to see the baby being born. We don't need to see the baby growing up. We can start right there. Or even, do it in the credit sequence, Have a little, like, this is our family videos or our family album, and, like, as the credits are coming up, use Adam Sandler and Selena Gomez and Mel Brooks and Steve Buscemi. As these names are coming on the screen, the flip book is turning, and you basically just see the wedding and the baby being born and all that stuff. They do a little bit of that in the beginning at the wedding party, but it basically just takes place in the wedding party. You could have gone through all of that information in like 3 or 5 minutes. simple little sequence, give us a little bit of exposition, boom, we're right into the story. It's his 5th birthday, his fangs haven't come in. Those are the plot points. That's the problem, that's what we have to solve. They could have started a lot faster. So those are just a few of the little kind of pacing issues I had with the movie. Like, overall, it's not too egregious. I think somebody told me this movie is an hour and a half long. It felt a little bit longer than that, again, because some of those action set pieces didn't have to be there, like Mavis showing off on the bike and, like, doing cool stuff because she can defy gravity. Like, I mean, that said, this movie is fun to look at, even when it's, you know, there are some funny gags in the wedding scene and stuff like that, but, you know, then you have characters talk, and like, I'm so happy we're married, and oh, we're gonna have a baby, and oh, here's the baby, and it's like, you know, show don't tell if you're gonna do that. You can still have some of those visual gags in there, but show don't tell. So that's kind of my pacing issues with the movie. With these Hotel Transylvania films, the emphasis seems to be on really kind of cartoony styled animation. And it's, you know, it's all really exaggerated and fast, and characters have a lot of really crazy specific movements, and actually you can see this, now that I think about it, you can see this in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs too. Like, everything is really cartoony and stylish and exaggerated. Like, in that movie, everybody has these big eyes, right? And all the expressions are like, jaws like will drop like a crazy amount and things like that. And you know, you see Flip Lockwood typing, and then his fingers are doing this crazy kind of typing action, and like Johnny has a little bit of that with his thumbs when he's texting and stuff like that. But all the movements are really big. All the character movements are really distinct too. You know, Johnny does not move like Dracula, where Dracula is really stiff but kind of swift, and he'll like just kind of whip around and get into position. Johnny's kind of awkward, and he does a lot of stuff with his arms and gesturing. So really nice though, really clear, but really exaggerated, really crazy, really cartoony. You look at Pixar animation, and it's subtle. That's the key. The movements are really subtle. I was watching a frame of Up, and there's a scene of Mr. Fredricksen talking to Russell at the door, and you know, he's barely moving. He's saying words, and he's just kind of moving now and then. Like, he says, oh, my arms get tired, and he lifts up his arms a little bit, but like, you know, everything is kind of really reserved. Not necessarily, and again, not necessarily bound in any kind of crazy realism, but real reservation in the animation. You look at DreamWorks animation, and their CGI, and the key word is smooth. The animation is really smooth, really fluid. And you see in pictures like Home, you'll have characters with little squid arms and stuff, and like they'll be changing color and shape, and they'll be doing all this kind of stuff. But like, I don't know, they just work on their tweens, or they have some algorithm going or something, man, because their animation is really smooth. And watching especially humanoid characters move is really nice. They move really nicely, whatever they're doing. If they're just sitting down, you know, there's a scene in How to Train Your Dragon 2 where Hiccup's got this armor on, and he's got this fur vest on, and he's pretending to be his father. He's imitating his father, so he's like throwing his shoulders back, and the armor is just kind of jostling around, and just, you know, just really nice, really natural movements. So, you know, just wanted to kind of comment on those kind of three distinct styles, and then, you know, Disney, you can get into a like, I don't even know if you can pin that style down, because I mean, if we're talking about CGI, you know, Pixar's what, 10 years old? Like a little bit, well, maybe like 20 at this point, maybe like 20 years old, 95, 93, something like that. Toy Story came out. So, like, if you're looking at that kind of animation, just, you know, it's only had like a couple decades, but I mean, Disney, you're talking about decades and decades and decades and decades and decades of animation. You know, for the better part of a century, they've been doing animation in some form or the other. So trying to pin down that style, like, I don't know, man, like, it goes through waves. Like, there was a period of time when they were recycling their animation to get stuff done. I mean, it still looked great, because I mean, if you're modeling off of Disney animation, you're still modeling off of Disney animation. But you know, yeah, trying to pin that down is, you know, that's on another level. I think maybe
Well, I mean, you could say this about like all the studios. They all have their kind of technical lengths and breadths. But you know, I think Disney really goes for the technical stuff. Like you look at a movie like Frozen, you look at the 20 different kinds of snow they have simulated in that movie. You look at, you know, all the hairstyles that are happening. How does the hair look when they wake up in the morning? How does it look when they're frozen? How does it look when there's snow in it? You know, stuff like that. My guess is that they're more of a, you know, they're more focused on a lot of technical polish because of, you know, just they have the time, they have the knowledge, they have the expertise, they have the resources, you know, to, you know, buy up what they need to buy up, and, you know, make it just make it look as polished as it can. I think the people at all the studios, I mean, there's okay, you know, our name's on the poster, we have to make this good. But like with Disney, I think just because they are such an old company, there is more of a, like, I'm guessing there is more of a kind of, okay, this is a Disney picture, we really have to live up to the expectation that comes with that. That's my kind of theory about it. I don't know. They're really hard to pin down any distinct style, and of course, stylistically things will change a little bit from movie to movie. But every studio has their characteristic, kind of their characteristic trademarks. I think it's just interesting to note the kind of different styles of the studios, and Hotel Transylvania 2 is kind of a good textbook case for that. It's a good kind of look at the distinct style of this studio, because again, it does have that kind of, the characters are those big archetypal universal monsters, basically exaggerated into these, even more into these big cartoony forms, right? But they do have, you know, just looking at their movements, even in the pauses, you know, there's a scene where Dracula and Frankenstein, it's a joke, but they're basically just standing looking at each other for a long amount of time, and they're not moving very much, and the lack of movement is really telling, because it's juxtaposed with all these scenes of these characters running around and bouncing and falling and tripping, and just like even their regular gestures just being big and exaggerated. So when there's no movement on the screen, it's another extreme that they go to. They really pop between those extremes, between a lot of movement and very reserved, very little movement. I mean, you can see that in the character of Dracula. He's either stiff and like just kind of gliding across the floor, or he's like whooshing around and just like using his big bony fingers, and his face too, like it changes into form so much. Like there are moments where like he's trying to be cute and his eyes just get really big, and like I think the shape of his head just like morphs and stuff too, and just gets really big as well. So yeah, just a lot of exaggeration, really cartoony, really fun. But I really appreciate it because it really tries to make you forget the fact that these are, you know, puppets that have constraints to them and, you know, can only move in a certain way. It looks like they're floppy and they can flop around and bend and warp in any kind of way. And that's really distinct of this studio. You're not going to look at any of these studios and what they're outputting and be able to find much to critique in terms of the way stuff moves. Like you're just not. It all looks great. It doesn't really, you know, pick any of these styles any day. It has to fit the property, I guess, but you know, they all seem to pick properties that this seems to be in line with. So just a brief shout out / update on what I'm doing, what I've been up to. You know, I've been taking a few classes just to kind of up my drawing game. So I haven't been working on the reel as much in terms of animation. I'm just trying to up my drawing skills and whatnot. Taking some drawing classes. Working on some theater as well, trying to get something going with that. Had something going and then it kind of stopped. And now I'm just kind of trying to roll with the punches and see what happens. But you know, I'm optimistic about what's to come. Just a shout out to TAAFI. I managed to win a lottery for some tickets to an evening with Graham, Anable, and John Klassen, who are two Sheridan College alumni who worked on the Box Trolls. So that was really cool. It was a cool little event last Thursday. It was kind of neat because both of them kind of, Klassen's a published award-winning
children's picture book, or he's basically an illustrator. He's done like young adult stuff too. And he's an illustrator. He's done some of his own stuff, some client work, about 8 books all told, I think he said. So they focused on that primarily, and for Anable, he does Grickle cartoons. These kind of short. They're almost animatics, but I mean, there's still very clear animation in there, just because he's been storyboarding and whipping up animatics for so long and gotten so good at it. That there are these animations that he kind of self-publishes, self-produces. So it was interesting to see them primarily talk about side projects and B, things they initiate themselves over the big studio work. Like, you think, both these guys worked on Box Trolls, you think, and a whole host of other stuff as well. You think they'd, that would be the thing dominating the conversation, but it was really much a conversation about their passions. It's interesting to see the conversation kind of taken from that direction. And I was okay. I was expecting, because the poster of this event was the poster of the Box Trolls, I was expecting a lot of behind the scenes stuff on that, and they did go into it a little bit, like a very, very little bit. There was some like animatics and some shorts and stuff like that, but I'd seen, the behind the scenes not documentary, but the behind the scenes lecture that was given by the 2 directors of the film, and I'd seen all that behind the scenes stuff about the making of stuff, I should say, the DVD extra stuff, kind of in that vein. So it was okay, and it was kind of refreshing to see, 2 people who have had, multiple big studio successes talk about their personal passion projects and their stuff they've initiated themselves. I mean, that's kind of cool. It was kind of neat to see that. So yeah, again, thank you for the TAAFI for hooking me up with the tickets. That was really cool. I'm gonna keep subscribing to those lotteries. Like, keep crossing my fingers, hoping to find something, because these events are cool that you're sponsoring. So thank you for that.